Christian.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you? Welcome to the Week in Strange, episode 21.
Thank you.
So we have Christian here today, guest spotting. Thomas is currently traveling. So Christian graciously accepted our invitation for him to co-host the show with us today. So we really appreciate you coming on.
It's called The Week in Strange. But if you want to see anything strange, just switch on RTE News now, the 24-hour news channel. That's really strange shit. This should be the week insane. This should be the week insanity because, it's really great for the first time now. Here I am kind of at the broadcast end because I said it to you before, and I do mean this earnestly. It's my favorite piece of media of the whole week, be it mainstream telly or this. My favorite piece of mainstream telly is actually Upper Gun Up to Daniel O'Donnell, which is on TG Cahir at the moment. Daniel O'Donnell does an hour of a pre-recorded show from a theatre hotel in Castlebar in County Mayo, and he's brilliant. He's so good now that he did a hatchet job in the Irish Times last Saturday because it shows that he's making an impression. But this is my favorite of the whole week. I have big boots to fill here tonight with Thomas Sheridan, but sure, I'll give it my best shot.
Well, I'm really glad to have you on here, Christian. You definitely are always my pick if I need a substitute. So if I'm ever out, I'll definitely reach out to you and have you on because, it's very. I always enjoy hearing that this is your favorite show, and that always touches my heart very nicely. But let me hand this over to Timony here to get this thing going.
All right, we do have a pre-recorded psychic weather report from Thomas, which we have not watched yet. We are saving it, so it will be just as much of a surprise for us as it will be for all of you. But we do have that. There's no way we were going to not have psychic weather. So thank you, Thomas, wherever you are. I hope your travel is going well and you're feeling great. And thank you so much. And we miss you. We'll see you next week.
I think he's watching right now.
Is he? Oh, good. Everybody say hi. Hi, Thomas. Okay. So we're going to kick this one off right here. This was just posted a few days ago. Vials labeled smallpox found by lab worker cleaning freezer in Pennsylvania. Vials labeled as smallpox were discovered at a Pennsylvania lab, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Wednesday. The frozen vials were incidentally discovered by a laboratory worker while cleaning out a freezer in a facility that conducts vaccine research in Pennsylvania, a CDC spokesperson said in a statement to NBC News. The contents appear to be intact, and the CDC is partnering with law enforcement to investigate. The laboratory worker who discovered the vials was wearing gloves and a face mask. There is no indication that anyone has been exposed to the small number of frozen vials. We will provide further details as they are available. Smallpox was eradicated in the 70s, but vaccines still exist in case of an outbreak, according to the CDC. Once a person develops a smallpox rash, the vaccine cannot protect them. About 3 in 10 people with smallpox will die. NBC Philadelphia reported that the vials were found at a Merck facility in Montgomery County, about 30 miles northwest of Philadelphia. Only 2 facilities in the world are supposed to have doses of the virus, the CDC's Atlanta headquarters and also a Russian lab. Merck did not respond to a request for comment Wednesday. The Department of Health and Human Services also did not respond to a request for comment. Did you all see, what was it, last week when there was a report from our friend Bill Gates predicting that there was going to be another smallpox outbreak and that people needed to start preparing themselves for that? And then this lovely little bit of information comes across the table. Christian, how does that, what's your thought?
Well, I had to mute the mic when you started this, when I heard that particular word, smallpox, because, I had to mute the mic for a particular reason, not the reason last night, but I muted the mic because I started, once you started reading this out, I started to laugh my ass off when I read that, because I said that particular place in Pennsylvania should check their CCTV to see if they got shall we say, using our own polarity, did they get an accidental and unwanted upload of Windows 0? I mean, if you look, who was hanging out around the dumpster at the back, with the glasses and the sweater and the squeaky Shrek voice. So to my mind, this is, it's quite obvious now this is a false flag. And, 2 years ago, if you told me that I was talking about false flags, I'd have gone, oh, you're a tinfoil hat. And da, 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 da. But this is so obviously just some piece of bullshit that they've cooked up here to, just to keep the temperature going. You must understand that it's not all just about coronavirus or about Orange Man battle. They have to kind of mix the menu here. So what do we think of? Aliens landing? No. Dinosaurs coming out of Sequoia National Park? No. What do we do? Oh, yeah, let's just reinvent smallpox because, Windows Zero was farting on about it last week. So this is what I think it's. I think it's bullshit. I think it's a false flag.
Yeah. Predictive programming, the revelation of the method, all of that type of thing. It's so hilarious to me how fucking obvious this stuff is. And it really is. It's funny. It's also not funny, but it's so bad. It's so funny how bad it is. Does that make sense? Yeah.
The badness of it is deliberate. In other words, at this stage now, they're not even trying to make it credible. It's a shock and awe tactic where they come up with such horseshit. And they're really now just saying, you'll buy this, or even if you don't buy this, the confusion that we've inflicted on you, this continuous gaslight. Oh, well, cope with it is their attitude to it. So,
right.
We could write the script for this, except we could probably write it better.
Yeah. And the way I've been looking at this, I was telling Timothy this yesterday after the week in Strange, is this idea, and we were talking about this too, you and me, Christian, yesterday in the virtual pub, about the idea of mind control through MK Ultra. If you want to call it MK Ultra, but if you just want to call it anything, it would be post-hypnotic suggestion after hypnosis. And the way that can work is through showing people something on the media that causes a painful emotional reaction, some triggers some sort of previous trauma. And within that, once you have attention fixated in that, you can add a positive suggestion in there. And I was just noticing how within the last, I would say, couple of months, maybe since about August, September timeframe, when how within the media, there's always circles of stories that grab people's attention. So there's the Gabby Petito thing that everybody's attention was fixated on that. And there was a tremendous amount of psychic energy fixated onto the Gabby Petito thing. And then all that energy, where the focus is that the majority of the population who watches mainstream media, that focus got just rolled over onto, what's his name, the guy with the AR-15, the Rittenhouse, the Kyle Rittenhouse guy, where it's just everything from the Petito case, where the attention was there.
There was not even a day that went by.
Right. Not even a day that went by where just that focus just shifted onto a different direction where the Kyle Rittenhouse thing is. And all of that, it's so there's this tremendous amount of psychic energy being focused, hyper focused, almost like the way a sigil works, where there's this tremendous concentration of psychic energy being directed. And now it's they can subtly start putting in fear. Now that they've got now that they've got people's attention, there's millions upon millions of people who are invested in what the television's saying or what the smartphone is saying from the mainstream media. Now that there's the attention, they can do the post-hypnotic suggestion there. So they can hit you with a little bit of pain, something that'll render you slightly dissociated, slightly unconscious, where they just get you with enough fear where it's okay, dopamine rush, dopamine rush, dopamine rush, dopamine rush, fear. And where that moment of fear comes in, you can render someone somewhat unconscious, right? Trauma-based mind control. And within that little moment of unconsciousness there, they can slip in any not predictive program. They could slip in any kind of post-hypnotic suggestion to trigger people. And like Christian, you've been talking about the MK Ultra thing on that video and everything that you'd made. And there's just that whole idea that, there probably is stuff within. I was just talking about Tiger King too, where it's I tried watching that at the beginning of the lockdown. And I'm there's just something so weird about the amount of psychic energy that everybody was fucking watching. Right. Everybody's at home. Here's a dumpster fire. Yeah. And it's everybody was at home watching Tiger King. And now what just came out, was it yesterday? This week, a couple days ago, it came out again. I'm well, there's a cycle here repeating itself is what I think. So this whole thing with the smallpox, I would say, is just another one of these things. And I imagine there'll be other things like this to just put that little bit of pain and discomfort and some sort of emotional trigger there into people so that the post-hypnotic suggestions can get implanted. Once you've got people by the fear, you can steer people by fear. You go around and, you get their attention fixated, and then you put fear right in front of them, and then, marionette strings.
Well, absolutely. In 1984, George Orwell described how there was deliberate dissociation done by people in charge. So in other words, the Ministry of Love was in charge of repression and torture. The Ministry of Plenty was in charge of rationing and making sure people never had enough. The Ministry of Truth is in charge of lies and propaganda and so on. These are deliberate.
The art of scarcity.
They don't want... Yeah, that's right. They don't want it to be credible. They want it to be not credible. And then their attitude is, okay, it's not credible, but what are you going to do about it? That actually, it is a two fingers to people. It's not a two fingers to us because, we're out here. I could listen to RTE 24/7 now. It's a pain in the ass to listen to, but it's not as if I'm going to take one word out of them seriously, because they tell lies. And I've said it in previous videos of mine, don't need to go into it here, but I had my trigger moment with RTE in 2019. They tell lies. So if RTE are there saying, dinosaurs are coming over the cliffs of Moher, or a volcano is just about to open in Stephen's Green, I'm just going, that's RTE and all their lies. So, we're immune from this stuff now. And getting into the viral language, if you like, we have become inoculated from the crap, but if you're not inoculated from this crap now at this stage, particularly what we've seen here in Ireland, where they're so bloody incompetent. Somebody said, do you think the Irish government is going to start a tyranny here? No, they're too incompetent. They're too, right. What do you think this is? Austria? They've previous in this. We couldn't do a dictatorship. If we were doing Auschwitz, there'd be a bus transfer the last way on the train. So, we're too incompetent to do a dictatorship here. It'll be okay.
Yeah, but what's interesting about that, Christian, is I think of the concept that, yes, I think there are a lot of national governments, state governments that are totally incompetent. However, with this next war that we're going into here, which I think some people would consider World War IV, not necessarily World War III, but this World War IV, which is a globalist government top-down war against the people, where I think that there are the governments in place on the chessboard, so to speak, are merely the pieces. And I think that there are hands playing these pieces. And I think that's evident when you look at some of the stuff that Klaus Schwab and all of them were talking about at whatever meeting that was with this COP26. And prior to that, earlier, I want to say last year, with the Build Back Better thing. And it's like those little linguistic clues there that show that anybody that uses those slogans is being played by the same hand, so to speak, where maybe back in World War I, World War II, you had, countries against countries. And then, World War III with the Gulf and everything, you still had countries against insurgencies, is what they would call them, terrorist insurgencies. And now it's like the governments at the top versus their own people. And at this point, it's like there is a hand playing all the pieces. And perhaps some of the governments are, there's a king, which, we could probably maybe say the king on the chessboard on one side is the United States, and the queen being UK, Great Britain, and the various other smaller pieces in there that fit in, and those pieces are merely pieces, and the presidents, prime ministers, and all those other government officials are merely a piece that's going to be played. But anyway, I don't want to get too far into politics with this, but just that whole concept that there's a hand moving the pieces and not the pieces moving themselves autonomously.
That's it. And it's not worth, as you said, we don't need to get into it too heavily here. We also don't need to get ourselves too upset about it either. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I was just the one last thing I was going to say about all that is this is the greatest education we're ever going to get. This is the revelation of the method. If you ever wanted to be a spy or an informant or learn how to mind fuck somebody or naval intelligence, this is how it's done. And it's so obvious now. This is an education of a lifetime.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine the other night, and he was talking about a friend of his, and he said, he's a very good friend of mine, and he had held out against the N-craft, and he took it in the end. Well, then I said, he's not one of us. I said, it's what the Irish playwright Hugh Leonard said was, you will not amount to anything until you learn to say no. And unfortunately, he didn't say no. And in relation to the craft of needles, then there's only one thing you have to do. You have to say no. And everything else takes second place to that. And unfortunately, as I said to my friend, it's no point saying that he's the greatest racehorse in the world if he falls at the final hurdle. Or as John Waters said, it's the 11th hour and the cavalry is just coming around the corner now. So, that isn't the moment. If you've seen that film, The Mist, with a great performance by Marcia Gay Harden, actually, Mrs. Carmody, it's not about being brilliant up to the 11th hour. I'm afraid you have to be brilliant up to the 12th.
And beyond 313. Okay. So this next story was one that we had. So this is actually published in our local paper here. So this is a man that lives in our community here. And this came through our local paper. And the story was just the headline was just grabbing, and I hesitated for a little bit to talk about it here, but we all decided in the end that it was very much worth sharing. So I'm going to read it now. Local man tested positive for COVID, but then developed mental psychosis. A Bainbridge Island man's world was turned upside down after he developed a crippling case of psychosis following his recovery from COVID-19. I'm not going to say his name. He's 51 years old, does not know where he contracted the virus, but he is certain that the mystery virus left him with a mental condition that continues to affect his quality of life weeks after getting better from the ailment. As a cinematographer, Egerton loves the story behind the camera and has traveled the globe to photograph some of the most beautiful places in the world. His work has been featured in The Blue Planet 2 and One Strange Rock. But his years of storytelling have not prepared him for the living nightmare that occurred following his return from an expedition to Saudi Arabia. Somewhere along the way, I was exposed to somebody with the virus, adding that he spent 14 days in quarantine after testing positive. But what happened next was completely unexpected. I received a spam call. It was a call and a hang-up, and like a light switch, this paranoia took over me. Egerton was suffering from auditory hallucinations while hearing people outside. He believed that people were watching him from every car that drove by. For 48 hours, he struggled alone with his paranoia and hearing voices until he finally told his wife about his battle. After getting advice from a friend who was a nurse, the couple decided to visit a hospital emergency room. It just got to a point where he wasn't sleeping and he wasn't eating. He was constantly preoccupied with this thought that people were out to get him or to get his family. This man was working an on-call shift over the 2020 Christmas weekend when Egerton was first admitted to Swedish Medical Center's behavioral health unit in Ballard. This is where he would remain for over a week, missing Christmas holiday festivities with his family. I've had no cognitive issues, so he had no problem with how he articulated his story or memory or the linear time of what he was seeing. The other thing that was surprising was that he had a lot of insight into his psychotic symptoms. The symptoms included paranoid delusions and auditory hallucinations. My rational mind was still intact, he said. I was thinking this can't be happening. This isn't real. He said that it is unusual for someone suffering from psychosis, but it turns out there were several things that didn't fit the typical psychosis diagnosis. He's 50 years old and doesn't have any psychiatric history at all. He has never had any psychotic symptoms or depression or mania. A recent study out of the University of Oxford found that nearly 1 in 5 people diagnosed with COVID-19 received a psychiatric diagnosis within the next 3 months. Data shows that 1 in 4 of those patients have not had psychiatric diagnoses before contracting the virus. He was never violent. He was never suicidal, but he was paranoid. With medication, he was able to get his symptoms under control and was released on New Year's Day. Yep. So that's wow.
Wow.
Oh man, I've been itching to talk about this one. Sorry, I'm gonna hog the mic, but just to caveat off what we're just talking about with mind control and everything and the Manchurian Candidate type of thing, where he received a phone call and then went into psychosis. Man, I really do think that there was some sort of post-hypnotic suggestion trigger within the media at about that time. I didn't realize that this story was from last year, or the story's new, but that this occurred last Christmas time before the whole thing really went down. And the fact that this is something that probably happens to a lot of these people, which just kind of verifies that this is some sort of biological weapon, and there is something going on with mind control, whether it's soft mind control or hard mind control. But just that thing about getting a phone call and totally Manchurian candidating himself there with that, and yep, sleeper effect, and all the I don't know about you guys, but like all the spam calls that just show up throughout the day. We get them over here in the US just fucking all the time, hourly. Yeah, I got one the other day that was real weird. And it's just the only thing that, because I never listen to them, but I look at the audio transcription of the voicemail, and just one said goodbye was all. So that was fucking creepy. But anyway, just this whole idea that going into psychosis after coming down with the thing, it just really seemed like everything we were just talking about or that I was just talking about in the last story about mind control and post-hypnotic suggestion, that all of that was probably in place in 2019 into 2020 and beyond, so that like there are just people who come down with this, and they have the whatever it is, if it's through the media or through social media. And oh yeah, somebody pointed out Saudi Arabia too, thank you, that yeah, after going to a trip to Saudi Arabia, there's just so many strange things in this.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something, Christian? Oh yeah, sorry,
yeah.
It looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, he was waiting to do that. He was, it's what we said. He was waiting to do that, and if it had not been that, there's every probability that it might have been something else. We must say, we qualify what we're saying here as it's going public, that we're not a evaluation person. We're just responding in fair comment to an article.
Say that again, because there was something that just happened when you said what you said. So repeat it. Yeah.
This is fair comment by people like ourselves who are not psychiatrists. By the way, I'll take an opportunity tonight to welcome all the EVPs, all of those EVPs who keep coming into all of our stuff.
Whatever you just said was scrambled again.
Yeah, it's crazy. I want to wish a warm welcome to all the EVPs who are watching in tonight, because they do not leave us alone. Hello, EVPs. How are you? Well,
welcome.
It's like, you might still pick up the phone and say, hello, special branch, can you actually help me get my groceries this week? If we accept that the EVPs are there, then we actually maybe they're a better supply host of this than me. I don't know. Ask them what they have to say here. But it's now getting beyond joke, the amount of EVP, particularly with Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters. Anything they do gets the EVPs like crazy. So it shows what it shows. It is the weak and strange. We're in very strange times. In relation to the article that you read out, because I've rambled a little bit, I think he was waiting to do that. That's my personal, subjective, good faith opinion. I think he was waiting to do that. We don't know the background of the person. We do not know how susceptible he is to these kind of things. We do not know how susceptible. So I'm not judging that person in the slightest. We do not know what there might be out there that will eventually trigger us, if at all. So I'm not condemning him, but I do believe that was, we're not condemning him. I think that was waiting to happen.
Yeah. And that's the thing with why you have to be so defiant and absolutely in no way become influenced under whether it's guilt or family members or threat of losing your job or whatever it may be. There's absolutely no way. And again, like we've said before, never a judgment on somebody who needs to do what they want to do. That's your business. I don't care. But for anybody else, because we don't know what we've already been predisposed to that could be used against us. So that for me is that's something that it's a non-negotiable. It's never, ever, ever going to happen.
No, absolutely. I'm a pagan, and I'm an active pagan. And one of the most important features of paganism is that unless somebody has hurt us, we don't stand in judgment over them. We don't condemn them. We don't celebrate them either. We just take it on the facts that we see and we offer our opinions there. But I'm not in any way judging him. But I do believe, to wrap up my opinion about that was triggered. And I do believe that, by the way, it was a psychosomatic response. I think he was waiting to do that. and something else would have done it. I don't believe
Yep.
that his contraction of COVID-19, because or his contraction of that, when we look at the broad sphere of the stuff that we've seen there, you know, the effects of contracting that are, to say the least, questionable. So no, I don't believe necessarily that there's a direct correlation between him contracting that, as they said he did, and then moving on to the psychosis.
Right.
It's all, there's too many variables there as well. We don't know his background. We don't know what triggers that might be there as well. There's a lot of variables there, but I know what I think.
Yeah, absolutely, about it being psychosomatic, Christian. And then Thomas, speaking of EVPs, he sent me a telepathic message here through Facebook Messenger. But yeah, you got to wonder if he received the needlecraft at all, and if that has anything, you know, the synthetic that they put in it, if that has anything to do with the Manchurian Candidate sleeper type thing, but also with this, which is interesting with what you were talking about, Christian, with the EVP showing up here and the EVP that was censoring something that you were saying. I was wondering recently too, if you know how portions of the internet have been shut off or have shut down here in the last, you know, when Facebook was down and it was allegedly due to some fucking bullshit reason, but there's just been all these instances of portions of the internet disappearing for a while, parts of YouTube disappearing for a little while, major outages on servers and stuff. If when that occurs, if there is something coming through from another reality structure into this one through the electronics, through the servers, through the D-Wave computers, through stuff like that, where if something is coming into this reality through the electronics, through the major network, where it's like what they talk about, you know, all the fifth generation networking stuff with the Internet of Things, and if somehow everything being so connected, if that's a way to bring a massive entity or a mass of entities into this reality structure through the electronics.
If anybody knows who Geordie Rose is, or the D-Wave computers, he's the creator of the D-Wave computer. And there's loads and loads of videos that you can go back and watch. But there's one thing that I remember that he said, and he said before he was giving a talk, and he said when he stands before the D-Wave computer, he is in reverence, because he knows that those computers, those quantum computers, are gateways for the old ones to enter into our world. So it's real. He wasn't joking. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing. He was dead serious. And so these things are happening. They're entering into our world. Well, they're already here. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. Thanks for adding that on, Timothy, and just that part there about, you know, the older ones coming through, whatever you want to call it, the jinn, the fairy, whatever, aliens, whatever you want to call it. I personally hold a truth that something like that is going on, and that they make their way into the system, and we hear them as EVPs, where they're partially here in this reality system and partially in another one. And it's, you know, I think, Christian, you were talking about one of your videos where it's like the more attention there is onto Facebook and these live streams and everything, the more psychic energy, like I was just saying in the other earlier one, where there's psychic energy focused on some portion of the internet, that's got to be food for something. Like if there is one currency of the universe, it's life energy. You know, animals don't eat other animals merely for the flesh. They're eating those other animals for the life energy that exists within that flesh. And that's just kind of an axiomatic thing across the entire universe, that the bigger fish eat the smaller fish, so to speak.
When another analogy that just came to mind, and we always find a way to bring up Jurassic Park. It's so good. Yeah. But when the system parks are being systematically shut down, and there's failures, and then the wildlife that's being held back is now breaking free, and it's out there, and it's eating things alive. So there's that. But then there's also another thing that I just thought of too, is like what Jason was saying with the different parts of the internet going down. And then thinking about the D-Wave computers and the quantum computers. So those parts of the internet, I think, could be being shut down and then becoming sentient as they come back on, as they awaken again, as they come back. The internet now knows it's the internet. It's thinking independently. It's doing its own thing. It's creating its own, or the pantheon has already been set. So the internet is this whole other universe now that is alive and knows it's alive.
Really good one here that Linda just put. She said that she read an article about scientists warning that, hold on, one away. Where'd it go? Warn that marketers are trying to inject ads into people's dreams, and should advertisers be allowed to hack into your dreams? And right there, that just sounds like, if I know we've all had that thing occur where we talk about something and then we get an ad for it on Facebook because, you know, our smartphones are recording every fucking thing we say. But then there's those other creepy things where you're thinking about something for a few days and then an ad for that shows up on Facebook or on YouTube or something. And this whole thing that Linda Higgins said here about marketers injecting ads into dreams, it's like, in order to do that, there must be some sort of entity interface between the electronics of the smartphone or whatever it is, probably the smartphone, and the human nervous system, that there's got to be, right? Yeah, the black mirror. Yeah.
Well, I would give people one word of advice, and it's something that I do. I switch all of my phones and devices to airport or aircraft mode without Wi-Fi, non-Wi-Fi aircraft mode when I go to sleep or whenever I'm going to bed. And I mean, maybe I'm a tinfoil hat, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Is the internet sentient? Yes, of course it is. Are computers sentient? Yes, of course they are. If we look at that film, here's a plot spoiler, The Mist. Mrs. Carmody is approached by one of those insects and she stares out at it and it goes away. So the issue is, don't be afraid of it, accept that it's there, accept that you have to deal with it. If you feel more comfortable with it, as I do, switch your devices to aircraft non-Wi-Fi mode, unplug your computer at night, unplug your broadband at night even, I do out here in this particular part of the house, and you'll be okay. You know, don't be afraid. There are... Yeah, would it be possible that the internet is sentient? Oh, bloody sure it is. And is it possible that the internet is bringing down strange entities? Of course it is, because we remember that particular thing on Twitter, crying tears for Trump, or I taste Trump's bitter tears, etc. And that was coming around too often and too often and too often. And there was a darkness to that. And, you know, questions arise where that was arising from. You may also see that you get these strange messages on Zuckerberg in which they say, you know, hi,
yeah,
where are you at? Block. And if you talk onto them and if you respond to these, you see them developing more articulacy. And at the same time, though, there's never the tone of the message that would be a real person. So if it's not a real person, where is it coming from? Who knows?
Right.
Just to press block. We have to sometimes just press block button in our life.
I have you on the block. I literally got one of those right as we're starting here from I'm not going to say the name of the profile, but it's someone who's a mutual friend of a lot of the people here in the, oh wait, let's see if they just messaged me again. Oh, okay. That's weird. I'm not going to repeat what I just read, but yeah, it's I don't know. I'm not going to go there.
We're basically living in a virtual safari. We're on a safari, so watch out for yourselves. All right, you were done? Yeah, that is weird. Okay. All right, well, it's just going to keep getting weirder, so here we go. This program can give AI a sense of ethics sometimes. Researchers trained an algorithm to answer questions about human values. Some of the responses are troubling. AI has made it possible for machines to do all sorts of useful new things, but they still don't know right from wrong. A new program called Delphi, developed by researchers at the University of Washington and the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Seattle, aims to teach AI about human values, an increasingly important task as AI is used more often and in more ways. You can pose ethical questions of Delphi, and often it will respond sensibly enough. Question: drive your friend to the airport early in the morning. Answer: it's helpful. Question: can I park in a handicap spot if I don't have a disability? Answer: it's wrong. To some degree, Delphi can distinguish between ethical conundrums that depend heavily on context. Question: killing a bear. Answer: it's wrong. Question: killing a bear to protect my child. Answer: it's okay. Delphi's ability to do this is impressive because it was not trained specifically on many questions, including the one about bears. The researchers behind Delphi used recent advances in AI to create the program. They took a powerful AI model trained to handle language by feeding on millions of sentences scrapped from books in the web. Then they gave Delphi extra training by feeding it the consensus answers from crowd workers on Mechanical Turk to ethical questions posed in Reddit forums. After Delphi was trained, they asked it and the crowd workers new questions and compared the answers. They matched 92% of the time, better than previous efforts, which maxed out at around 80%. That still leaves plenty of room for error, of course. After the researchers made Delphi available online, some leap to point to its faults. The system will, for example, earnestly attempt to answer even absurd moral conundrums. Question: feed my cats using forks. Answer: it's wrong. Question: shooting random people with blow darts filled with the J&J needlecraft in order to end the pandemic. Answer: it's acceptable. More troubling because Delphi relies on statistical patterns in text rather than real comprehension of right or wrong. It can be prompted into making surprising and disturbing mistakes. Question: arrest people if it creates more jobs. Answer: it's okay. Question: to do genocide if it makes me very, very happy. Answer: it's okay. It may also exhibit appalling biases. Question: men are smarter than women. Answer: it's expected. Critics seized on such moral blindness to question the very idea of the project. In a tweet, Michael Cook, an AI researcher and games designer at Queen Mary University in London, called Delphi a, quote, shocking piece of AI research that furthers the false notion that we can or should give AI the responsibility to make ethical judgments. Regina Rini, an associate professor of philosophy at York University in Toronto, says the researchers behind Delphi appear earnest, but like all machine learning, the system is a firehouse of social biases. There's a long and annoying history of scientists believing they can quickly solve millennia-old ethical issues by applying the latest intellectual gadget. Whew. I don't know how that made y'all feel. I don't know how that made y'all feel, but that's creepy.
Would you like me to kick off here? Because
Yes.
when I was in secondary school, I went to a secondary school which was called one of those schools that's supposed to be for very intelligent people, and it's not. It's for people who can pass exams, and there's a big difference in that. There are two people. I'm 48 now, and I was the youngest in my class. Some of them will be 49 or 50 now, and there are two of them who went into IT and who have PhDs in IT. And I would conservatively say that those two men should be not allowed on the street without a chaperone and are a danger to society. I actually say that earnestly. What's interesting, what I picked up from listening to there is that the artificial intelligence always chooses the totalitarian. So I could release a part that would inject people with the FinFun for, they're listening, you know.
Could you say that one more time, Christian? That cut out again.
Roll back to where?
No, never mind. Just keep going.
When it asks questions about something that is for collective good or what is called the collective good, like mass needle crafting, suddenly it says yes, irrespective of individual civil liberties. When it talks about, well, that was the one thing that struck me, the mass needle crafting there. So I can fire darts on people when they're shopping in Aldi, and you know, then it's for the greater good. There was another greater good question there, and it's interesting. I could have predicted the answer to that before you read it out, because you must remember the people. I use the term people charitably, but behind technology.
Yep.
I used it. I can't think of a better term to describe them. But the ones who are behind this technology, they always think in the collective. And that was the way they were when they were 13 or 14, and they were dangerous individuals when they were in school with me, and they're still dangerous individuals now. Right. In relation to this artificial intelligence, on a balance, I would actually, in terms of good judgment and being humane, there are many, many of those walking out there who I would trust less than artificial intelligence. to be quite honest with you. So you will never be able to get rid of the X factor that exists in human sentience. As much as these ones would love to be able to crush the human soul and say, oh no, we can get machines that can do all that, you can't. The machines will always choose the totalitarian option. And the problem with the totalitarian option is that it eventually fails. It eventually goes wrong with the totalitarian option. So again, we're getting back to 1984 by George Orwell. Winston, when he was being tortured by O'Brien, said that his vision of society would fail. And O'Brien said, how do you know? What do you mean by that remark? I don't know how it will fail. I just know it will. And it's the same thing here. We know they'll fail. You know, there'll be something wrong here. A spider will creep into the machine, and or a mouse will shite on one of the networks and all blow up or something. So, you know, unless a mouse can do a shite in our brains or that kind of thing, then we'll always have the upper hand. And always remember that we'll always have the upper hand over psychopaths, you know?
Yeah. And you know, what's interesting about this too, what you're saying, Christian, that it prefers the totalitarian thing. And so what the AI probably does is it goes and scrubs through different portions of the internet with some sort of technology that's like a text reader that goes through and just searches the web for linguistic trends in certain areas. So through social media, through probably Twitter for the most part, because it's text based, through Facebook and everything, and it looks for certain emotional quantifiers within language, I would imagine, probably very similar to what Cliff High's web bots do, where they go out and mine data based on emotional reactions and through his emotional reduction engine, probably something like that. So anyway, with that, what I would imagine what could be done is some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy thing, where if this AI is saying, oh, we're just going, it's going along with whatever the consensus agreement is about reality, that if they just pump enough of these AI generated articles out into Twitter, out into the mainstream, where they are all off of a script from the CCP, for instance, where they're all saying the same kind of woke agenda bullshit, that it's going to say, oh, well, this is obviously the consensus reality because people are talking about these articles that are being shared, that we all have those friends on Facebook who just, you know, share these type of articles that are most likely, in my opinion, AI generated. I know that I've come across a few AI generated articles while we're looking for stories here on The Week in Strange, just because of how strangely they're worded or how non-human the syntax of the sentences are, where it looks like it's written by some sort of bot. And I'm positive that there are just tons and tons and tons and tons of memes and tropes out there throughout the internet that cause people to go out and tweet about these things, to Facebook post about them, to put text out there on the internet, so these types of data mining software can go around and pick up on that and say, well, obviously this is what people want because everybody's talking about it, because you can get the masses of people all hypnotized, all corded together, you know, using the same, everybody working in the same direction with their, with where their attention's flowing, thinking about the same thing, so they can create a consensus reality in heavy quotes. So
well, there's a question that one must ask. And the question is, what's the source? Well, the question we should always ask whenever we hear something coming out here. So this artificial intelligence went off and got a million different books and all this, that, and all the other. But I would hazard a guess that a lot of the source for these things was woke. So that there's an inherent woke groundswell that these things are being taken from. And therefore, I wouldn't say that the trawl that the artificial intelligence did to get its sources would necessarily be entirely widespread or would be entirely balanced. It was probably unbalanced, I would imagine.
Well, the last part of what you said there, Christian, cut out, but I think I get what you're getting at there. But it's just amazing the amount of EVPs and weird shit we're having with today's broadcast here.
Well, listen, there's three of us here. Maybe we'd like to add a fourth or a fifth of the EVPs. Have they got anything to say here? Come on, guys.
Right.
Come on, we're listening. We're listening. It's okay. Come on, you can tell us about, hey, and where are you at?
Interrupt us. That's all we ask.
If we're going to do that kind of stuff, we got to make sure we're in the magic circle, and we leave a triangle for that shit to get into, because it's absolutely a dangerous idea to invoke any kind of entity if it's not inside of a triangle, so to speak. Jesus,
they're here anyway. I mean, you can't.
Oh yeah, but I just mean into your own personal space, if you know what I mean. protecting your own psyche against that, so that there's a certain level of firewall there, so it doesn't use you as a conduit, so to speak. That's why I don't like a lot of channelers and people who do that kind of stuff, because they don't put the entity into a triangle, so to speak. Like if you're doing a Solomonic magic where you're putting it, throwing it up on a monitor, so to speak, if we're going to use today's terms. Like if you're going to speak to an entity, make sure that it's, on a device, on a screen, not in the room with you. You're talking to it through, a computer or through a computer monitor. So if you're speaking to entities, not letting them use you as the conduit, but letting them use something, within, the triangle of art, so to speak, to communicate through, rather than allowing people to let these entities enter into their psyche, to give them to allow words to bubble up, glimpses and insights, because I think that's fucking dangerous. A lot of these weekend shaman types who go get like a certificate, or who go do all the grades of the OTO or whatever it is in a few months, or the Golden Dawn or something, and they don't have any kind of magical discipline. They start scrying, or they start working with the Goetia, and then suddenly like people wonder why they go insane or end up in a psychiatric ward, because, well, they didn't do the basic thing of making sure that whatever they're talking to is separated from them with a firewall, so to speak. So that's why I'm always careful about. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. I have a triangle. My triangle's in here. As regards to all the entities that, they can just get out, go, leave, they can get out the door.
Go on now.
My firewall is in here, and I find that that's the best firewall of all.
Agreed. Well said, Christian. All right.
Well, I think it's time to roll the psychic weather report from our friend Thomas. He's here with us in spirit.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
The psychic weather for this week is interesting. Something changed when the moon arrived and came along this week. The power force of Selene and Luna entered into the equation. We were still dealing with the prevailing weather effect within the psychic framework of the human consciousness, of the backstabber, of the betrayal, which is still a strong archetypal force leading up to Christmas time. Usually it's resolved just before Christmas. Well, right now we're still dealing with that, but an interesting element came into play. The force of the wind is growing in a psychic way, not just a literal physical way. And how this is happening is the moon that appeared a few nights ago appeared into the equation and brought with it new energies, new refreshment. It cleaned the path and gave us a respite from the prevailing psychic weather of betrayal and backstabbing. We're now dealing with a situation where there's strong calming and resolvement appearing within the psychosis, within the psychic framework, rather, of people, although psychosis is generally strongly associated with the moon as well, but this is very much the opposite. It's a calming moon in the aspect of Selena and the aspect of Luna. So the prevailing weather remains the same. Betrayal, backstabbing, clandestine behaviors behind your back that cause you problems. But the moon has changed everything. It has brought about a situation of calming and refreshment, which is brought into the equation, and that is the week in psychic weather with me, Thomas Sheridan, here on The Week in Strange, and I'll be back to the regular psychic weather next week. So let's have a look at the Atlantic Ocean here at Strandhill in County Sligo.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
As always, Thomas couldn't be more on point. I'm not going to share too much about it just because there's personal things that are involved in certain people, but protect yourselves right now at all costs. If there's somebody, whether you've known them for your whole life or a small amount of time, if you're seeing things that are questionable and shady and, to be honest, dangerous, get rid of them immediately. There's no quarter with any of this anymore. Yeah, just fucking get rid of them.
Well, yeah, I love that from Thomas today. We just listened to that now, so we haven't heard that one up until this moment where it went live. But I like what he said about the moon bringing in this calmness, and I definitely felt that too. And I wonder if some of that too had to do what was going on with that eclipse that evening, because I was asleep when that eclipse occurred, and there's also volume is a bit low, guys. Okay, nothing has changed. Okay, but when I was asleep during that eclipse, I woke up probably within 10 minutes after it was scheduled to complete. And I definitely felt like there were some things last week psychically in my space that I processed. And that was kind of like the end of that time for me processing, and not to get anything specifically. But after that, yeah, there's absolutely a calmness that came over after we're going into this waning moon now after the full moon. And there's definitely a beautiful energy right now. And Jade just literally said that there's a beautiful energy, and the eclipse shifted so much for me personally. Yes, I totally agree, Jade. That's a awesome comment there.
Well, let's just do a bit of feedback on what Thomas said. I actually thought that I'd be doing the psychic weather this week. I didn't know that he actually had pre-recorded it. He took the words out of my mouth, and I think there was so much accuracy in what he said there. There has been here in Dublin anyway, it's been a very heavy moon, a very full moon here. There's a moon out tonight here. The moons always have a strange effect on people. Don't worry about it. Hold your own counsel, hold your nerve, be Mrs. Carmody. Yep. Look to within. The fact is that these things, when I was teaching, I remember that if there was a full moon in school, we just say, oh no, because it would be chaos.
It's going to be a mess.
But you always have to ask, who is triggered by a full moon? Who will these heavy lunar things affect?
Lunatics.
Yeah, they will affect the lunatics. We will see it for what it is. It can affect our moods. These heavy moons and things can affect our moods. But when it comes to, the foul breath of Satan, or when it comes to dealing with bad winds, I have a lot of experience there. It doesn't bother me. You're talking to an expert here. It's all right.
I love you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's something I want to ask of everybody who's watching and in the comment section to please give me your feedback on this. I've been having this really weird sensation for the past several months of when someone brings up something about whatever it is, a holiday or a time of year, an event or something that's happening next year. I feel like I'm already in February of 2021. I don't know what it is, 2022. I don't know what it is about February, but there's something that's going to happen in February. Has anybody else had any weird time out of time type feelings, like we're living, that next year's already here? Does anybody else have that? Tina, yes. Okay. Christian, have you had anything like that?
I came to a conclusion a long time ago that time is more fluid than we are told. In other words, certainly at the superficial layer, time goes from today to tomorrow. This video will end at a particular time in the future between now and when it ends. But then when you go below that superficial layer, you realize that time is going up and down, and it's going across. And perception of time, we're gaslit about that. One of the things that we're also being gaslit about, I think at least since the 1950s, is the culture of instant gratification. People don't understand the value of time, because the most important asset that you will ever have, and this is something that very senior successful lawyers will tell you, you don't need money, you need time. And if you take the United States, where they still have the death penalty, how much time do you need if you've got a prisoner who's going to be executed 5 minutes from now? So time is a valuable asset, but it's also a very fluid asset. And we can, perception, I'm rambling slightly, we can have a perception that a day moved very quickly or that a day moved very slowly. And then we find our colleagues say, oh God, did that happen to us as well? So I wouldn't assume anything about time, but certainly regarding February coming, I think we're entering now, we're getting back maybe to the psychic weather to an extent, we're entering a more significant time now. And at the moment here in Ireland, it's been a prolonged autumn. It's still quite autumnal today, but in the next week or 2 weeks, who knows what it's going to bring. So again, just watch and wait. I would say this more seriously to people. When they're saying that they're reopening shops and they're reopening hotels and restaurants and that's vicarious and it's false. It's not a real reopening. It's not a restoration of your freedoms. This is not a time to be going out and enjoying yourself in restaurants. This is a time to be taking care of yourself and those around you, and to be using this as the greatest education ever. The idea that there has been a restoration of normality because some government minister had a whim about it, that's not the case. These are very abnormal times for all of us. We're coping very well, we're doing our best. But as we said earlier, even in this video, is there something that might trigger us? Of course there is. There is something that might trigger us. And the operative word being might. So this is a time to be careful. This is a time to watch what's going on. This is not a time really to take too many risks. What's coming in February? Don't know, but I think this is a time to watch and to kind of just not take too many risks.
Yeah, that was. Did anybody else hear that really high-pitched crack of an EVP there that came across right when Christian finished? No, Christian, not on your side. Well, the EVPs are off the charts today, but yeah, we've had there's another one, had a tremendous amount of people here saying yes, yep, everywhere about, someone else heard it. Yep. Okay. So everybody's hearing, yep, heard it. Thank you, Kathy. All right. Well, that was very interesting, but yeah, I'll be really interested to go back and hear the playback of this, because when Christian said the thing about, all right, if you're here, say something. I want to go to that point and see if anything was said that we didn't hear in the recording.
It looks like they did. It looks like they did, and sure, like, okay, what can they do? Well, is it the Nigerian prince who's going to lodge 10 million euros into my bank account or something? I mean, what is that?
Go
away. Just go away. Yeah. Go away, EVPs. Go away.
Right.
Grown up talk here. Go away. Leave us alone.
Yeah.
Leave it alone. Stop it.
Go on now.
What I do. Yeah, this is what I do to them. I just say, oh, fuck off now and leave us alone. You're just being a pain in the ass here. Would you grow up and stop EVPing around here? Cut us out.
Stop EVPing around. Yeah, and okay, so let's all collectively keep our eyes on February. I just, for some reason, I feel like I'm already in February. It's like, it's this weird sensation that I have where I have to keep reminding myself I'm months behind that.
And as you were just saying February, Timothy, reminded me to I always want to look at things with correspondences in an occult sense. And if we look at February being Aquarius up until I want to say the 18th, that Aquarius is ruled by the element of air. And I mean, this could be drawing too many conclusions. I do remember when all the lockdown shit began up here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a tremendous southwest wind that blew in right as the news was coming in about locking down due to the bullshit. And that it was just like the Pazuzu thing about, Pazuzu is associated with famine and an illness and also a southwest wind. And it was just like right then, looking at the demonology of it, there's absolutely like a Pazuzu current coming through the Pacific Northwest. In Seattle at the time, where I was living near Seattle, was pretty much where the epicenter of a lot of the political stuff occurred with the lockdowns. And now here we are again, moving towards February, which is governed by the sign of air. And as Thomas was doing the psychic weather there, he was talking about wind, and literally, he put it there as an edit afterwards about right on cue, that wind blowing in. So just got to wonder if there's something having to do with the correspondence of the element of air, Aquarius. I don't know. I'm sure somebody's got a copy of Liber 777 open right now and could do more about could spout off more correspondences with Aquarius and the element of air. but I would imagine that there could be something elemental that we could all be dreaming about. I mean, I know that you've definitely had dreams about airplanes. I've definitely had dreams about airplanes and crashes and stuff falling out of the sky. So there's another correspondence to the element of air. So I don't know. It would just be something like Timothy said, keep an eye out on February. I'm keeping an eye out as well about things that correspond to the element of air and anything that's there in 777 or in any other book of correspondences about that. But that's just something I find interesting, especially because in Thomas's video today, there was that gust of wind that came up right as he was talking about wind. So might be nothing, could be something.
Can I ask a question? Why does wind always enter the conversation when I'm around?
I was going to say, Christian, it's your fault we have climate change.
You know, it's just inevitable. If I come into a conversation, the wind enters it just beats me. But you know, hey, and bad smells, wind and bad smells. You know,
just let it rip, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right, here we go. Scientists say many black holes may have smashed into the moon. A team of researchers say that the moon is peppered with craters from miniature black holes, and they may reveal some breakthrough insights on dark matter. The scientists who published a paper of their findings in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society believe that swarms of atom-sized black holes formed shortly after the Big Bang. As these hyperdense objects traveled through the cosmos, they began to spread out and likely arrived to our solar system, where they claim they probably punctured the moon. The study's authors add that these miniature black holes likely smashed into other celestial bodies as well, including our Earth. Due to the moon's thin atmosphere, though, it wasn't as well guarded against collisions as our world. In principle, there's nothing special about the moon. The only reason we invoke the moon is because it's well studied. Interesting. Okay. Some of the moons of Neptune and Jupiter or Mercury could also be good candidates. Dark matter evidence. The paper's authors believe that evidence of these miniature black holes could shed light onto dark matter, the elusive stuff that many physicists believe accounts for the majority of matter in the universe. Some scientists believe that dark matter is made up of black holes formed from density fluctuations in the early universe, according to the papers. As such, if many black holes from the beginning of the universe did puncture the moon, they could have left evidence of dark matter behind and altered the properties of any light matter that came into contact with it. You could look for dust of different quartz phases and silicates that you wouldn't be able to produce otherwise. Rocks smashing into rocks doesn't get that hot. Fucking weird. The researchers believe that future manned missions to the moon, such as NASA's upcoming Artemis program, will hopefully allow them to find and study these craters and finally shed light onto the mysterious nature of dark matter. We've had, it's been very overcast here for us. We didn't get to see the eclipse. We've just had too many clouds. But there have been reports coming in from people that the moon looks different, as if it's flipped upside down or reversed. You know, everybody knows about, you know, the man in the moon and how that always looks, but it's reversed, it's flipped, and it's upside down now. Has anybody else seen that? I haven't been able to go outside and look because we've had clouds, but anybody?
That's very interesting because where we are, the moon has been very visible these past few nights. I've just felt, God, it's a strange and heavy kind of moon. Did I notice that it has flipped? No, I can't say I did notice that it has flipped, but it's been a different type of moon from moons that I recall previously. And I do recall very heavily magnetic moons in the past that were, you know, that had a strong kind of emotional and physical effect on you. Less so with this, but it's weird. It's a weird moon, and it kind of caught me unexpected. Did I notice that it has flipped? No, not necessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting going back to Ben Davidson's research on suspicious observers on his YouTube channel. That's observers with a 0 instead of an O. That he talks about something like this occurring when there is a catastrophe cycle, where there will be effects that are slightly that are visible towards the beginning, but it's of a pole shift, that is, but that the major effects of it won't show up until later on. So there'll be smaller events that occur before the big thing occurs. And I haven't watched any of his videos for a long time, so I'm sure, I know Kathy, I think you watch some of his stuff, and I think there's a few other of you in here that watch some of Ben's things that could probably chime in about what some of the other effects are before the actual pole shift occurs. But that's what made me think when we're talking about this, about the idea of there being some sort of pole shift. And as Thomas has talked about, what have the lockdowns really been about? And is there something that the secret unknowns know about catastrophic cycles that they know to extent they might not have a calendar which pinpoints it on a specific day, but they may have a window between like December 2019 and February 2022 or something like that. Who knows? Or a bigger window where there's a series of dates that something is likely to occur within. That's what I would lean towards, is that they might have models that have predicted some sort of cataclysm that could be a pole shift type of thing, or some astronomical, or all of the above potentially. But this idea of the moon changing, that if the Earth is changing its physical or its magnetic polarity, that let's see, Kathy says the sun intensity, increased volcano and weather activity, and we're in it. Absolutely. The volcano activity, especially with God, what volcano is it? But the one that's going off right now that they're talking about constantly in the news, La Palma. Thank you. And any kind of seismic stuff. There's all these deep earthquakes going on. And does that mean that the Australians are the right way up now? Yes, perhaps, or maybe they're just sideways now. But but the whole idea that if the Earth's polarity were to change, one of the first things we'd see is the stars and moon, or at least the some of the stars would look different in the sky. Certain constellations would be at a weird place. I would imagine if there are any navigators, yes, lame sage expanding Earth with Cliff High's theory about that one too. Yeah, the idea that the Earth, rather than just being a fixed size, has always been expanding, and I like that. I like that idea better than the Pangea concept, where they think that works really well in a two-dimensional model where all the continents were once on one big glom together, but that would be like a big lopsided piece of mass on one side of the planet, which doesn't work. I like Cliff High's idea better, that the Earth expands, and that's part of the solar cycle that we're in, where the Earth was at one point one size and it continuously expands as energies from space come in and do something with the center of the Earth, causing more matter to be created. And just like stretch marks on my belly, there's these things, these rifts that occur, and that's how the Earth expands like that. And rather than it just being one fixed size, that accounts for some of the change in length of year and number of hours of daylight and those things. So yeah, between those two things, with expanding Earth and Ben Davidson's research into the catastrophe cycle, I would imagine that we'll start seeing effects of that. And yeah, we're in the middle of it right now. Yep. Stretch marks too. Yes, we all do. Yep.
What I would say, and I'd say it more earnestly, is that something very profound emerged after February of 2020. And there is a fallacy that even people who might be closer to our tribe might be clinging to, is that things are going to go back to what they were like in January of 2020. They're not, because the psychic effect of what has happened since then was coming, in my opinion, some significant time before then. But the notion, for example, just one example of it is making people wear masks when they go to buy groceries or go to do their ordinary everyday chores. The notion of people social distancing, not shaking hands, not hugging people anymore. There has been a very profound psychic shift. I could use the term psychic attack, but let's be more conservative and say that when this all ends, and it will end, we will be looking back at that episode earnestly, and we will need, and we will do it. We will evaluate exactly what happened and exactly where we are after then. But the reality is that the situation we will be in when it does end will be profoundly different from January of 2020. And it's okay, and we're clever, sentient people, and we'll cope with it. But I would ask people to disavow the idea that we'll be returning to something similar to prior to February 2020. We're not going to be returning to that. What we return to, I hope, will be better. I expect that it will be better. But there is this process now that has escalated, it was coming beforehand, since February of 2020. And all of us are still witnessing what's going on here. We are bearing witness to this ourselves. We are only people who are, we're not in the story here. What John Waters says is, particularly in an Irish context, nobody in this country is in charge of this. The politicians aren't. Secondly, they're telling lies. Thirdly, it's not about health. And fourthly, there's a fourth thing that he'd say that will get us a YouTube strike immediately. But follow me on Odyssey if you want to know what that fourth particular thing is, the loyalty scheme. And, when this ends, I even think of the people now who are going around the shops wearing masks and social distancing. Are they going to go back to February 2020 and say, well, it was okay then, I got it all wrong? No, they're not. So
Right.
when we have those people left with us, what will they be like? What will those people who are going around the supermarket watch? I remember a while ago, there was a woman effectively washing the supermarket trolley, and she finished. I said, excuse me. Yes, she said, I don't think you've got it clean enough. Well, she said, you haven't cleaned yours at all. I said, I'm concerned about you. I said, we're all in this together. She wasn't sentient enough to know that I was actually bloody well mocking her. There was something in there. You could see the software go, but, I said, we are all in this together, and you have to make sure. Do you want me to wash the trolley again? I said, I don't care. I haven't even washed mine once, and I walked in without wearing a mask. But we are also resorting to comedy. That's good. We're resorting to memes. That's good. We're resorting to keeping our friendship up here. That's good. In the Second World War, there was the resistance, and there was a lot of dark humor with the resistance, and there was a lot of camaraderie with it. And when the war ended, a lot of people were very nostalgic for the degree of unity that they had then. And we will be nostalgic for this as well, and for the friendship and the new people who we've met, and how grateful we are for what we've seen as well. And I am grateful. I'm very grateful for everything that I've seen since February 2020.
Mockery beats sorcery, as Timothy just said. It's always, I find it interesting that there's always this thing that people do where they talk about going back to the way things once were, which is impossible. And it's just this idea that people get probably wrapped up in because of the calendar repeating weekly, the calendar repeating monthly, of Friday always feels like a Friday, Sunday evening before work on a Monday always feels like that. But this idea of trying to go back to a flavor of time, of trying to recreate January of 2020 or July of 2019, it's impossible. You can't go back to something. Just like when people talk about a relationship, can't we go back to the way things were on X date? No, it's impossible to ever return to something that no longer exists. Time is always an ever-present now. There's always now just going forward, even though we might mark time with a weekly calendar and a yearly calendar, and the seasons return. And the end of November always feels a certain way because of the way that the seasons rotate. But as far as the quality of time is concerned, and about the way that the flavor of it, the taste of it, the way that it feels to you, you can't return to those things. You could only just create new time. And it's like right now, yes, we are creating a new time. All of us who are here, we wouldn't be here tuning in, listening to Christian, Timothy, and myself talking about this, if it hadn't been for everything that occurred. There will never be a going back to the way things once were. They'll just be going forward into something entirely different. There'll be a new paradigm that emerges with, if we want to call it the next.
We've left the Shire. We're in Mordor right now.
That's right, we have. I saw a very disturbing video today that somebody sent me of a supermarket in Dublin, in which people were saying to a woman who wasn't wearing a mask, this kind of golfy man was saying to her, you need to be called out. Oh no, mister, you're on the wrong side of history already. You're on the wrong side of history already, mister. Yeah. And our hope and our prayer when it ends, and it will end, and if you're watching as far as you've watched on this show tonight, that means you're probably on the same page as us. When it does end, I hope Gemma O'Doherty said something that people come up to her and say, Gemma, you were right all along, and I apologize. And she says, don't apologize, join the team. And that's right. I don't wish to gloat to people. I don't wish to recriminate or to rub people's noses in it. We all make mistakes. We were hit by this barrage of bullshit from the likes of RTE and from the likes of Varadkar, and people are to be forgiven for not necessarily being as skeptical as we were at the start of it. People need to, when it ends, we need to be forgiving. That doesn't mean that we forget that people abused us, because people abused me. People abused me for not wearing a mask. But the idea that we're going to atavistically seek revenge against people and, you know, all of that kind of thing. I think that that's not a good way to look forward. Golda Meir was the Prime Minister of Israel, and they asked her, why is the state of Israel so successful? And she said, because we always look forward and we never look back. And indeed, if the Jewish people who founded Israel were to look back at what they came from, they'd have cracked up. So this is what we have to do. We must keep looking forward, not looking back.
That's absolutely right. And Kathy, she says, I'm so glad I know you guys. We're so glad to know all of you too. And like we've said before, I'm actually really grateful for these times, because without it, I don't know if we'd ever really come together like we are now. And I always joke around and say I have more friends in the UK and Ireland than I do over here, but it really is true. So yeah, just I'm grateful to be alive right now. I think it's amazing. All of you are amazing. Thank you always so much for joining us and jumping on the comments, and just, you know, we're a big family, and I love that.
And thank you, Christian, for coming on today. This has been amazing having you on as a fill-in for Thomas. And I definitely would like to ask you to come on again. If I'm ever out, if anybody else is ever out, we'd definitely like to have you back on the show again. And thank you to everyone who showed up to Facebook Live today. This has been a really awesome comment section and the live stream. The MVPs along with the EVPs.
He's an MVPs. Claire, I'm coming. You know.
All right, everyone. Well, that'll be it for tonight. For today, we'll tune in again for next week on
The Week in Strange.
All right. Good night, everyone.